I'm loving the sense of Jeremy in everything that you're doing here. I want to start by thanking Shane so much. I never had Shane as a teacher, and interestingly, you describe him as both a student and a teacher. And my first experience of Shane was him reviewing students like Simon Walker, where he was talking about his stadium in Kilmaine, and Susan Cogan talking about her thesis. And I knew when I heard Shane talk, or maybe not talking, that there was something very important happening. And this was me as a first year student coming from East Clare, Limerick. And I think you're very brave. You've taken on a subject and a great architectural practice through Shane and John. Did you have any fear at all?
Hi, Shane. I didn't have fear, no. I think the fear came from others. Whenever I said I'll be talking to Shane, everyone, the face was always getting serious. I think you were probably a bit serious. But actually meeting Shane was wonderful. Shane is so warm and funny, and actually he gave me so much. He gave me a lot, but a lot was in an interesting way already there. So I guess what I tried to do was pull that thread and present a thread where Shane is, again, a very important person in Irish architectural culture that actually connects a lot of people. And I don't think I actually said it in the film, or it might have been a thing that Kenneth Frampton came and said to me after the premiere at the Royal Academy. But it was the kind of observation in the film that the practice of Shane and John's is a kind of meeting point of Khan and Alto. And that Kenneth Frampton has always seen Irish architecture as a meeting point of Louis Kahn and Oliver Alto. And he enjoyed the film because the film revealed that. And I had not really realized that's what the film did. But then when I rewatched it myself, having watched it probably 200 times, I realized that there was a moment where that is said. So yeah, I think in some ways Shane is important, but also not important at all. Because
I didn't say that.
I said it. Because he is a meeting point in a way, and he's a space himself in a really interesting way.
Yeah. No, and I was really taken by your repetition of to be an architect, and in some ways that lineage from teacher to student, nature to student, seems very rich in some ways, and that kind of conversation that you highlight that's ongoing. Can I ask about you keep referring to misreading and the uncertain mechanics of architectural inheritance and that sense of betrayal in order to innovate. Can you say more of that in the context? Maybe it's clear to others, but I was quite struck in that kind of misstep, let's say, or...
Yeah. There must be something that allows us to move forward. There must be something that moves architecture forward and it changes it. It might not be... It's moving. It's definitely moving. It's moving in time and it's changing in time. So I don't know what exactly it is, but I think placing that word in the context of the film maybe allows the viewer to think about it, to think about whether any of the things that we see in the film are actually misreadings or misinterpretations or misunderstandings. And I think often when we read another architect, we think that we know what they mean, or we think we know what it is, and then we take that thing. But then how do we know? And again, Shane is also interesting in that respect, that he hasn't spoken too much about his work, and that you also mentioned silence, and that there's a space for silence. But in this space for silence, I feel like there is a space for some kind of thinking, which by default is going to be misreading and misinterpretation. And I just thought that's interesting. And surprise is also always comes at the back of a misreading of a situation. So you're surprised because you've misread a situation. And I think surprise is also very important in architecture.
I was really taken, as I said at the outset, this is the third time I've seen it. And when you think about this as a kind of a weave of landscape, buildings and conversations, landscapes in many ways, but I'm thinking about the very center point of this film, which is Shane's study and the most mesmerizing room I really need to get to see that room. It's extraordinary. The 4 books of Palladio, framed individually, and then paired with these monumental sketches of Louis Kahn. I wouldn't know what to say in a space like this. And it has this kind of fulcrum in film. Did that surprise you when you saw that space?
Funnily enough, I didn't really think about how that space in itself is a meeting point of Kahn and Palladio. Somehow it was maybe an hour into our lunch that I was like, oh, this is Palladio everywhere. And somehow it really does feel like a wallpaper. It feels like a kind of distant landscape. And I enjoyed that. It took me a while to acknowledge Palladio's presence, yet it's framing a context for Kahn. And it was then by doing the film, it was through film, through the act of making the film, that became maybe another conversation that has to be highlighted. And that's another point that Kenneth made after the film. That's maybe a dialogue that hasn't really been explored much or articulated. I don't know if I'm curious if Shane thinks about that dialogue as a dialogue, or it's just Palladio surrounding Kahn. I don't know if it's a conscious curation.
There was another moment in the film, if I may, or your essay or your collage, let's say, where all of these students are sitting at the bases of the Ionic columns. And I was like, why can't we do this more? Just sit among masterpieces, and not to be careless, but to caress these buildings and to enjoy them in so many ways. And Shane's buildings and Kahn's buildings, Shane and John, should I say, they are open to that base in many ways. The pedestal is taken down to the ground. I was really reassured by that there's something very constant about it. But there's also the surprise of a dialogue about a sill, which is utterly beautiful. And that thing of thinness with weight. You leave this quite open at the end. It's a train journey and you're in New Haven, you're heading back, really.
Boston, yeah.
Is this going to go further? Have you finished with Ireland? Or are you?
With Ireland, definitely not. but I think maybe I think we had this conversation yesterday. I feel like I've said something and I don't need to say it again. And I think I've said a lot of things that I've been wanting to say for a long time. So it's things that I've learned by working in practice and things that I've learned by learning and teaching, and that I think maybe I would have wanted to tell my students, but then at the same time, I'm not sure they'll really understand it until they've spent at least 5 years in practice. So yeah, maybe there's some other things that I'd like to talk about, but they would be maybe different things.
Yeah. I mean, it takes somebody from beyond to, I think you've left us with a very rich, deeper understanding of not just the work of de Blacam and Mark, but Irish architecture. And you mentioned Shelley and Yvonne, and Steve has John and Valerie and Neil, are others that are very poignant in their. I'm just wondering, with such a luminous audience, is there questions that people would like to ask?
A comment, I guess, or a question on this convergence when you were showing, I think, Briggs apartments, and could be Dublin, it could be other places as well. So maybe a question on it. I've noticed this myself. How much you need architecture, things are the same. You go to England, things are the same there. You see all the hotels from the city centre there and the same. So maybe like a commentary on that.
I think that is a question that I'm asking in a way in the film. Are we all just building one big building? And maybe we are. The kind of sameness is maybe not so much something that I'm interested in, because sameness is a kind of aesthetic quality. I'm interested in expressing that we are always in dialogue. So yeah, it is a good question, because I think it combines both what I would like the film to do and what I wouldn't want the film to do. But that sequence of blending places and buildings was an important sequence, because it really was a kind of maybe an argument, a central argument, that we don't really know where we are. Yeah. Sorry, I can't be more definitive in my answer.
And quite amazed that you didn't use the word sculpture at all, because to me, architecture is useful sculpture. And the magic of approaching the Michelangelo's busts, torsos, and approaching at the Blacam building, or any building, but we're talking about the threat of material of space and to move around that. And that's what we do all day. So that's just my comment. And congratulations to you all.
I think that's also a really wonderful provocation. I guess I've been now thinking while you were speaking, I guess something in sculpture is maybe graspable, whereas architecture sometimes it requires more effort to fully understand, and then you might still not quite understand it. So I don't know if I would use world sculpture, but I will think about it. But I'm not sure if I would use it.
I wanted to ask you a question about why you made it the way you made it. I mean, how did you know that you were going to make the film in this way? Because I suppose I don't know if anybody in the room would really have thought about how this film would be made. And this is wondering if there were 5 other ways of thinking about making this, approaching this subject. Was it something unexpected to result?
Thank you. I think it probably is unexpected. Like, I didn't obviously visualize the film before I started the research, but I think at some point, obviously, I had a pile of material in front of me, and that material was very varied and diverse in terms of quality, literally a number of pixels in each piece of that material. So I very quickly wanted to be honest about it and maybe just use the material as is. And of course, there is a degree of manipulation of that material in the film. So I wanted to acknowledge that it's a collage. But then every collage, there has to be something that brings it together, and that's why it's a single voice. It could have been something else. I was reminded the other day, I teach architecture and we work with film as a methodology. And so every year we take our students to Stanley Kubrick's archive, the London College of Communication. The entire archive is there. And we were looking at the material related to the 2001 Space Odyssey. And what was amazing is that probably a third of that material was related to a film that was going to be a talking heads documentary of space travel, of what it's like in cosmos and what space travel looks like and so on. And then clearly Kubrick at some point in that process realized that wasn't going to be a good film, and then created a different kind of film. And that actually made me think about my own process, that I think there is at some point just it becomes what it has to be. And yes, I think that is what the film is. And I think if I was to make the next film I make, I think it will probably not be like this, but then it will probably have some components of it.
There are a number of lines. I just have a number here written down, and one particularly one that strikes me, maybe to conclude the discussion, like, good architecture always fails to meet our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I was knocked down by that.
Do you agree?
I do in so many ways, but I just think, to Charles' question, that kind of ambiguity or the richness or the openness of what you've done is full of possibility and potential. Maybe it's up to the next filmmaker or the next architect to come along and further that discussion, but I personally feel it's a really dreamlike, rich and deep conversation that you've opened up. And maybe on that note, I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you,
Marko, and thank you for coming to Dublin and showing your beautiful film. And thank you to Frank, to the British Council, to the Arts Council, and the Irish Film Institute. Sabina, thank you so much. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.